lot more comfortable speaking to her with a British accent than I do with my American. She's also very apprehensive of me because she feels like my Americanized person. I think that's just me wanting to stick to that code and still feel that sense of belonging to how I grew up. Let's get my sister. Come on. You. So I was thinking this morning, and I was like, yeah, I haven't talked to my sister in a minute, so I might as well call her. How you feeling? What are you laughing for? What's the problem? Anytime I talk to her, she always laughs or she always points out the fact, like, why am I still speaking this British code? But the thing is, I'm still that. Your American is terrible. I'm here. How, y'all? Now, Texas. When I moved from England to Texas, it was a big adjustment. I would be in class and I'd be answering the questions, just trying to be a good student. Yeah, I might have an answer to that. Well, here's the thing. Page 4. What's so funny? And I have my friends like, oi, Harry Potter. Oi, get us some tea and biscuits. But Harry Potter is actually a fictional character. It's not real. I'm not the real. No, I'm not the black Harry Potter. Hello, Spelling. I'm cursing on all my friends and made fun of me in the 7th grade. Can y'all I had to do that every day, so I started picking up the language with my friends that I did make and calling everything hello. From going from Harry Potter to hey, hello, what's up? If you meet a person from Texas and they call you hello, you're just giving you an overall encompassing definition of something that they may not feel like they should define. So if I say, yo, can I ask you?
Okay, so he's talking about code switching, another element of multilingualism. And again, I'm going to have people that are very firm on code switching is the way to go when we're in bilingualism, multilingualism, and this is what happens. Translanguaging is just a term that somebody invented recently. But that really doesn't matter. What matters is that we understand that when students are learning, they're going to be doing this code switching. In this case, he explained to us how he code switches in his own language. And in English. And he's talking about how he code switches when he talks to his friends, when he talks to his mother, when he talks to his sister, when he is with his peers in the academic space. But we also have code switching when it comes to Spanish, right? So when our students are learning, we're going to have our students going between English and Spanish, right? And that's normal. And I know that there have been moments in the evolution of how we teach English where we were taught and we were told English only, otherwise students are not going to learn. But then the new studies, the new research, and the new investigations around learning a language tell us that it's more enriching when we let the students use all of their linguistic repertoires, which means all of their languages. And if you can watch the whole thing. The team has the presentation with the video, so you are welcome to explore that after the event. And also, if you want to learn about translanguaging and code switching a little bit more, Ofelia Garcia offers a very good webinar about this. So that's why I left that video over there. The takeaway here is that whether we're thinking about it from the perspective of translanguaging, or whether we're thinking about it from the perspective of code switching, when we are in a multilingualism context, we need to take advantage of the students' former knowledge, all their languages, and all the cultural richness that brings. Now this visual, let's talk about empowerment and agency, which is part of this session as well. In the visual, you see a word cloud of what empowerment is. It's that ability, is that process, is that power, is how independent we let our learners be, is how as teachers we become facilitators and not controllers of everything that's happening in the classroom. And that's difficult because we have a lesson plan to follow and we want to make sure that we're following that. But it's not impossible because we can have a lesson plan, we can have a program, and still introduce those avenues where we are letting the students take control and keep within the curriculum and keep within the program and stick to our lesson plan creatively. So these are things when you think about empowerment in terms of definition of what it means. And then, no, go back. And then this report from the OECD that talks to you about agency. And if you see, in terms of development and sustainable goals and access to education, the development agencies, education agencies are talking about agency. And agency is something that we have sought for many years, because agency is just another term that we use to describe long life learning and taking control of my learning as a learner. And note that I'm not saying student, I'm saying learner. Because when I say student, student is somebody who teaches them. But when I say learner, that's a person that's going to learn regardless of whether they have a teacher or not. And that's what we want our students to be. We want them to be learners. And the OECD is introducing this brief because they are giving us suggested ways, based on evidence, based on research, on how we can and we need to promote agency in our classrooms and agency in education. So I invite you to read that. We're going to move to the think per share. But before we go into that, I want you to notice something about the way in which I have defined the terms. We started with some text. Then I introduced to you a little visual infographic that was telling you the what, the why, the how. Then we did a video. Then we did an image. And then we did a report. Did you get the notion of the definitions? Do you have now the definitions in your mind? Yes or no? A notion at least, not the perfect definitions, but a notion at least. Yes or no, gracias. We are totally lost. You lost us. More or less? Moment. Está bien. Que solo llevamos como 15 minutos en esto, entonces that's okay. But what I want you to notice about the ways that we introduce the definitions is that I didn't give you terms from the dictionary in all instances. What I did was a multi-modal approach to giving you and discussing definitions. And that is something that we should be doing in the classroom. And in this case, because I was defining different terms, I used different terms. But maybe in a teaching context, what I would do is that I would use the multi-modal approach to one thing, to vocabulary, for example, or to a topic that we are discussing. Let's say that we're teaching the present perfect, and I will use a multi-modal approach to that, because we want our students to see things in different ways and through different lenses. And as you know, as human beings, we learn things by repetition. And it doesn't mean that we have to go into repetition drills, but it means that we need to be exposed to something at least 7 times before actually learning it. So we need to keep that in mind. So right now I want to do an exercise, and in your seat, after what we have discussed and what you already know about multilingualism, I want you to think for like a minute or two, how does this connect to empowerment and agency? And I'm going to give you 1 minute, 2 minutes to think about that. And take the time here. Think about how multilingualism, what we have discussed, connects to being empowered and to building agency. This is a common exercise that we use, think per share. And the idea is that you think individually, because then you're going to be sharing. So that means no speaking, because you're thinking quietly. See, when we give those instructions to students, right? Those are hard to follow. But when we're thinking quietly to ourselves. Because then you're going to speak. And the idea is that you have time to process the information. Because for the last 20 minutes, I have been talking. But I need you to process. And now I want you to turn to the person next to you and share about what you have been thinking. Talk to them about multilingualism, what you have learned today, what you already knew. Share with them how do you believe that connects to empowerment and agency. And I'm going to give you 3 minutes to do that because I normally like to speak a lot. So 3 minutes is a good. Huh? You can be 3, of course. We can have groups of 2, groups of 3. So it depends on who you're sitting next to. But make sure that you share with someone. It's important to share. And I'm going to give you 30 more seconds to share. So wrap up your idea. Okay, so let's see if we have 2 or 3 brave volunteers to openly share. But also, if we have people that are a little bit shy about sharing openly, I created this tool, it's a Miro, where you can actually add your thoughts and then I can learn from you. Because the idea with events like this is that you learn from what I know and what I've done. I also learn from what you do and what you have done. So whoever wants to do it through the QR code, go ahead and scan that QR code and write. But I do need 2 to 3 brave people to actually openly share. We have a lot of those here. So who wants to openly share? You want to openly share, right? No? Come on. Who is brave and stands up and shares? Usually it's the women. Just saying, you know. There you go. Told you.
We were talking about the empowerment is to give them the learner skills to be better, and the agency could be the way how to learn, how to teach them in order to empower.
Exactly. So agency would be how they demonstrate it, right? When they have mastered that skill that you have facilitated for empowerment, through empowerment. Very good. Another brave volunteer? Maybe another woman? Or man? That works too.
I was discussing tonight about how important it is to have our students choosing, for example, the way they conceptualize recognition. That's something that we do pretty common in the classroom, which is asking them to give me the concepts in Spanish and then translate them into English. But it's not me who makes it, but them. So I think in this way I empower them by taking into account their translation machine with their native language, of course. So I think it's really important for us to know this space in which students empower themselves with the concepts of the definition of the class.
And that's a perfect example of how you connect multilingualism with empowerment and agency, right? Because you're using all their linguistic repertoires, mobilizing them in order to be able to learn a definition, to learn a language, and to use what they already know. So we're scaffolding, we're translanguaging, we're code switching, we're using writing, we're using multimodal approaches. So you just described everything. So you should give this conference next time. Very good, thank you very much. One more person, one more brave person. And I imagine everybody's writing in that QR code, so I'm going to learn a lot of your content. Or you can be a student who has experienced this also, that has that teacher that was really a facilitator, that empowered you and that allowed you to build agency, and now you're a long life learner. Because we have had those, right? Those types of teachers. Okay, I'm gonna let you rest and lower your anxiety. We're gonna move on to the, before we move on, I wanted to share this visual of what Think, Pair, Share looks like in case that you haven't used it. Because I think it's a very good strategy for getting people talking, especially people who are a little bit shy about speaking in public. This helps them. Let's go on to the next, and then, yeah. So we're gonna go into concrete examples. And as I advised you at the beginning, as I advised you in the introduction, I want you to reflect about how you can adapt this to your context. Examples that I'm giving you are from my own experience in the context that I have worked at. But I want you to think, these are suggestions that you need to adapt. Maybe some of them you're going to be able to use them right away. Some of them you would need to accommodate. Before we go into the concrete examples, I want to tell you a little bit about my identity. Because when we talk about multilingualism, we need to value identities, our learners' identities. So I'm Gracia for most of the people, but I'm also known as Gracia Maria. My father used to call me that. He passed away some years ago. And then my husband sometimes calls me Gracia Maria. He likes that. He's not angry when he says that. He just likes it. And then I'm Gracia Maria Mendoza Chirinos. That's my Latin American identity. 2 names, 2 last names. And in some cases, there are more last names, right? And there are more names. But this is me in the Latin American context. But I'm also now, because I moved to the US a year ago, I'm also Gracia Mendoza. 1 name, 1 last name. I don't think I like that very much because I like my mother's last name. And I like to keep it as much as I can. In anything that is legal, I want my mother's last name there. And I can tell you that I am a very proud Honduran. So now when I introduce myself and people tell me, where are you from? I say, well, I now live in Indiana, but I am from Honduras, right? I cannot leave my Honduran heritage outside because I'm very proud of being Honduran. And I am a learner. I think I love learning, and I want to learn all my life. I want to make sure that I'm learning constantly. I'm 50 years old already, but I want to continue learning. And I can confide in you that I might be engaging in a PhD soon. So wish me luck with that. Because I'm 50 years old, the brain doesn't work very well anymore. And I have been an educator for 30 years. I have been a teacher trainer all over the world for 15 years. I've been a researcher for the last 7. And I have been a mentor for teachers for the last 4 years. That's my professional identity. I am also personally the mother of 2 sons who are 28 and 27, a wife for 30 years, and I'm also a sister, a daughter, and a friend. In terms of languages, I fluently speak Spanish and English. I have basic notions, more reading and understanding than actually speaking, of Portuguese, Italian, and German. I used to speak German very fluently, but in Honduras, there weren't a lot of people that I could practice with, so I kind of lost the speaking part. And then, recently, I have engaged in learning Mandarin and Arabic. And I can tell you, those are very difficult languages to learn. They are very tiring, and they have no connection to Romance languages, which means that if we have students in our classrooms whose languages don't connect with their native languages, it's going to be difficult for them to learn, and their brain gets really tired. So as I'm learning these 2 new languages, I'm experiencing what our learners might experience in the classroom. So I feel that empathy is that, I know what my students are going through. And then, also in the professional aspect, I have a master's degree in international education and TESOL, and I volunteer with teachers all over the world. And I like to do that because that has allowed me to learn. And that goes back to, I'm a long life learner. So, as we move forward, I'm going to give you a minute for this, because then you're going to be reflecting about how to adapt the examples that I give you. Think about yourself, professionally and personally, who you are. Think about yourself as a language educator, but also think about yourself as a multilingual learner. And I'm sure that people here know more than 2 languages. So that's why I'm saying multilingual and not necessarily bilingual. Think about yourself as a multilingual teacher, teaching learners who have different languages that they know. And then think about what shapes your identity, what shapes who you are, and who has empowered you and allowed you to build agency, especially when you're in the classroom or in a language classroom. So I want to let you think about that for 1 minute, and then I'm going to move on. If somebody wants to share, I'll let you share, but you don't have to. But think about that, because identities are part of multilingualism in what we do. Thought about yourself. We usually don't get, I wish I could give you more time. We usually don't get along quickly, but it's always a good thing to think about yourself and what shapes you and what makes you who you are. So let's move to the next part. This is an image, and when I was looking for images to define what multilingualism looked to me, I thought it's like a river flowing in the mountains. I love mountains. Now that I live in Indiana, and I like that here you have mountains, but you also have the plains. I miss the mountains in Honduras, because in Indiana, there are no mountains. It's flat. When I was moving to Indiana, people asked me, what are you going to miss most from Honduras? And I said, well, if I cannot find my food, I might miss that. But then when I was there, I realized what I was missing was my mountains. So when I think about multilingualism and how effective communication can be, I think about a river flowing. And I make that analogy in terms of ideas from our students flowing in the different languages. Going through a mountain, and that means going through different contexts, going through different activities, going through different ways of thinking, going through different perspectives. And us as teachers, making sure that it's safe. Yes, there are rocks over there, but we're going to create a space where it's safe for learning. And then, I want you to think about this photo and think about how you can use it for multilingual communication. What type of exercise would you do? And how could you facilitate the work so that your student knows how they can use their languages to facilitate communication? So think about that as we move along, because when we effectively communicate, we want to make sure we're communicating everything. Our emotions, our ideas, because that's what language is for, right? We're communicating everything that we feel, that we think, be it personally or academically. And sometimes we focus in language so much in the academic, and then the personal stays away. But we need to remember that we are an integral individual, right? That has emotions, that needs to think about things in a certain way, or that needs to express things in a certain way. So think about that, and you will have access to the presentation so that you can reflect on that. How to build agency and promote empowerment to multilingualism. I did 3 visuals. You need to engage your students, and for that, you need to make sure that they are on task with you. And that doesn't mean it's a hard task and they're focused individually. It means that they are interested in the activity because it's meaningful. And because it speaks to them individually, as a group, as part of a team, and it gives them that sense of belonging. We're used to hearing about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now they have added access, others have added social justice. I think it's important to add belonging. Because when we provide access, we are saying, you can sit here. But when I provide belonging to you, I can say, you can sit here, I see you, I recognize you, and I value what you have to say. So to promote empowerment and agency, we need to provide that sense of belonging. If the student feels they belong in your classroom, they belong in that learning process, it's going to be a little easier to work in providing that teaching for them. And also I want to highlight the work that we do at the University of Wisconsin through WIDA. And these are our 6 big ideas. And this has to do with equity, with integrating language with the context. It has to do with interconnections. It has to do with building collaboration. It has to do with translanguaging and making sure that we are mobilizing all those linguistic repertoires. So there's a link over there where you can explore a little bit about this. These are 6 big ideas for teaching Spanish, but it's applicable for teaching English as well. And then think about all these 3 things when you are trying to promote empowerment and agency through multilingualism. So these are some examples of agency. Bring in the lesson and let the learner establish the goals. You empower them to set the goals for themselves. That's going to build agency. Positive feedback. I know that sometimes we like to say, this is incorrect. But it's better when we say, you did a good job working on this task. How do you think we can improve this? So be more like a coach, right? Instead of telling me, this is wrong, this is the right way, that's not going to lead to a lot of learning. But if you say, look at this from another perspective, how can you improve this? Then you're going to get them thinking. And then that's more positive than saying this is wrong. Promote self-talk. Self-talk is so good because it takes you through the process. And as teachers, we can model that because we do that. As teachers, we self-talk and we say, voy a hacer esto, y entonces después los estudiantes van a seguir con esto, y le voy a poner esto aquí, y mi lección queda perfecta. You're doing self-talk. And if you model that with your students, they're going to really love that because they're going to be allowed to do that as well. And that helps with that cognitive process. Also, let them contribute to others' work, to their peers. Learning becomes better when the peers are working collaboratively together. And then this becomes students teaching students, teachers supporting teachers. So right now we're teachers supporting teachers, but you want your students to also be supporting each other. Because we have students that have high levels of proficiency, others that have high levels of creativity, others that have high interpersonal skills. So we need to bring all those assets into the works of the classroom. Give ample space for choice. So this goes back to, I have a lesson plan, I have to follow the program, I need to stick to the curriculum. So within that program, curriculum, and lesson, you can provide choices that fit your goals, but also that fit your learners' goals. Promote curiosity and engage in discovery. That's really important. Yes, we need to have certain habits that we have in the classroom, but there also needs to be some anticipation from your learners. What's going to happen in the English class tomorrow? I'm excited to see that. You want them to be excited about going to your classroom. And create metacognitive spaces. Spaces where you let them think about how they think, reflect about how they're learning, right? You want to do that. And then promote self-reflection. And self-reflection is very important for mental health because it allows you to process what has been going on. Today you're going to go through a long day of sessions. I encourage you after each session and at the end of the day, tomorrow over the weekend, reflect about what you have learned and think about how it's relevant and important to you. And this connects with social emotional learning and that Cassell framework. I'm a big advocate for that because in Honduras, we worked on this for 6 years, and I was fortunate to work in a project where we were doing this, integrating social emotional learning into the classroom, and we could see how this supported learning and how this created progress in learning. So I'm a big advocate of self. That's why I included that framework over there. So self-reflection contributes to all of these things, and you want to make sure that it's part of that classroom. At the end of the session, maybe in a post-it, right? How did you feel today with the class? I was anxious, I was happy. Those are the responses that you might get. That helps you craft your lesson for the next time, right? How do I make sure that my students are not that anxious, are not that stressed, right? What are things that I can put there? One before. There. Another way is to do shout-outs, team love, okay? We like to be told, yes, you're doing a great job, but we also don't want it to be a habit where you say, good job. It has to be real and it has to come from the heart. The learners know when it's not true. So make sure that when you say good job or when you say you're fabulous, that comes from your heart. And model. As teachers, we need to model. If you want our students to do something, we should be doing that as well. So whatever we want them to do, if we want them to write a journal, we should be writing journals. If we want them to write post-its, we should be doing it too. Co-evaluation and self-evaluation, and instead of calling them disadvantages, setbacks, or weaknesses, we call them areas of opportunity for improvement. Because when we call it setbacks, disadvantages, weaknesses, it has a very negative connotation, and language is very powerful. But when we call it areas for improvement, we are saying you are not there yet. And that means you will get there. And that's part of the empowerment and the agency. Self-reflect again, and make sure that we are working on social emotional learning for that learning behavior that we want in the classroom. Simple things that you can do in your classroom. Your seating arrangement. No more rows. Let's do circles, right? Let's do corners. Technology, how do you want to integrate that usefully? And different approaches or methods. Content-based language teaching, task-based teaching, CLIL, technology, right? PBL, project-based learning. Those are things that you can do. But also think about the nuances and complexities of your context. You are working in a low-income area. What are the access that my students have to basic things, and how are their basic needs satisfied? And how can I work to empower them if they're living these situations? Crisis and conflict. And sometimes crisis and conflict in the definition is limited to war, but I can tell you from working in public schools and the public context in Honduras with a project from USA, we worked with around 500,000 students. They were in low-income contexts, but they also were in crisis and conflict contexts where there were gangs in their neighborhoods. And what would happen is there was a school that they needed to go here, but they lived in this neighborhood, and because here there was an opposing gang, they couldn't go to school. So how do we navigate those complexities and those nuances? Those are things for you to think. Multi-level classrooms, we have a lot of those. Internal displacement, when people are migrating from school to school, we had a lot of that in Honduras. I imagine there's some of that here in Colombia. Return migrants, yesterday we were talking about how recently migration all over has been a topic and an issue. How are we dealing with those students that are coming back from their migration situation? And then the multilingual backgrounds, which is the center of our session today. Then suggested activities, you do this, so these are things that you already do, but something that I want to say when you're online, do not abuse breakout rooms. I have found in my personal learning, whenever they tell me now, because that was very abused during the pandemic, and then now whenever they tell me, let's go into a breakout room, I immediately disconnect. My brain doesn't want to go in a breakout room because we have been doing that too much. So use them, but don't abuse them. Keep activities at blocks of 15, 20 minutes. So if you notice, first 20 minutes of my session, I let you process, I let you think, then I go to the next part. Because that's how our brain listens and is attentive to. And then use brain breaks or mindfulness strategies. These are some tools that I have used. They are really good. Nearpod, if you want to explore it, I suggest that you go into it. It has a library of ready-to-use materials, but it also has tutorials on how you can use that. Kahoot and Mentimeter for polls, Padlets to create portfolios, Flip to create videos or only audios, TED Talks. TED Talks are amazing. They're short, they're to the point, and TED Talks now has TED Talk Education, which has lessons that are ready for you to use or that you can adapt. And then YouTube and Facebook groups. Facebook groups I like. I wrote a chapter about that for a technology book, and it's good because you can approach multi-level classrooms that way. And then keep in mind how the tools help you for diagnostic, collaboration, engagement, or assessment. So, I'm good, 9:25, very good for me. So, final tips and key takeaways. These are my takeaways, but I want to hear about your takeaways. Pásame el QR code. You can go to that QR code and leave them there, or during your questions right now, you can tell me or you can ask me. So, this is what I had prepared for you. I hope you liked it, and I hope you learned at least one new thing. And if you didn't, let me know to prepare better for next time. But thank you for having me. It has been a pleasure to be with you today.
Habíamos establecido desde el comienzo que íbamos a dejar alrededor de 5 minutos para ronda de preguntas. No sé si alguien dentro del público tenga alguna duda, pregunta para Gracia. O por medio del QR code.
Por medio del QR code también lo pueden hacer. ¿Preguntas todo quedó claro o no se entiende nada? Eso le decimos a los estudiantes nosotros. ¿Quedaron claros?
Or mess. We have a question. You have a mic? out loud. Yeah, okay. In our context here in Tropico, Casanare, for us, we can say that it is mandatory to use bilingualism. It's impossible, to go through a class only by using English. I think that you mentioned a really important topic, and it is the context. We usually have low-income students with a very punctual socioeconomic background. But you know what? When we're trained as teachers, a common thing is that we cannot teach in the native language because that's negative in a way, and it's a common thing, right? And it sticks to our minds and it becomes a philosophy. So my question is, how can we take advantage of bilingualism without abusing a lot of the use of the native language? Because sometimes when we allow students to communicate and to make relations in their native language, they start to feel that comfortable that they say, oh, you know what, I'm not gonna use English. So what's the point of balance from your own experience?
And I can tell you from my experience, when I was teaching in Zamorano, some of you might know Zamorano. Zamorano is an agricultural university in Honduras that has students from all over Latin America. So we have Ecuadorian, Colombian, Peruvian, also students from all over Latin America. And that used to happen to us. Students were real beginners, and it was you cannot start a class in English with real beginners. That's it doesn't make sense. So the balance that we found, and the balance that I found in my own classroom, was there were certain activities that I would let them do in Spanish, like group work or preparation work, and then they would present in English. Like the teacher over there, what's your name? Juan, like Juan was saying. So I let them do something in Spanish, then we were going to translate it in English. We don't miss the point of that target. But another thing that I would also let them do and find that balance is that when I was working with real beginners, I would tell them, okay, I understand English is not your language. Your notions of English are perhaps non-existent because of your context, but we need to get to the place where we are learning English and speaking English. And I would negotiate with them. And I would say, the first 5 weeks of the semester, we had a 14-week period. The first 5 weeks of the period, I'm going to be explaining things to you in Spanish and English, right? So I would use the presentations and all the resources in English, but I would explain in Spanish. And I would talk about the similarities of the languages. I would talk about cognates. I would talk about false cognates. I would make the connections to the language, and I would do that in Spanish, because I wanted them to feel comfortable. And I said, as we move along the weeks, I'm going to be starting to use more English until finally I'm speaking English to you all the time. But that didn't mean that they could not use Spanish. And in my case, that was the balance that I found and that worked. But I came to that agreement with them. And that's what builds that empowerment and that agency. It's that we agreed on that, and we agreed that that would be a good strategy. So I would recommend, how do you negotiate with your students on what a good strategy it is to go from one language to the other? Because in the end, their end goal is learning English, and you have to get there somehow. So negotiation, agreements, that's something that works. Thank you for that question. That's a great question.
Yes, we have another question. More than a question, it's a comment. Yeah, because first of all, thank you very much for sharing with us what you were reading and connecting this rate that is topics. Yeah, because talking about multilingualism at the same time with empowerment, with agency, It's like trying to connect in a puzzle. Sometimes it is not easy because all of them are connected, as you said, with identity. And it is really good to have you here today sharing because probably you are the best example of that struggle. Coming into a different country, going into a different country, trying to get a place in a different country, and with a different language as well. So that is probably the best example that we can have regarding multilingualism because it is what you were doing probably as learner, what you're doing today as teacher, as researcher, and sharing with us all those possibilities that we have in our language classrooms that sometimes we don't explore. Yeah, because we consider that teaching a language is just teaching the language and not moving further. And that is what we need to consider, moving beyond what we have in the language classroom, trying to understand first our students, our learners, because they are the ones who deserve our attention, and then moving into those other possibilities that probably we can construct around everything that is connected to language teaching. So thank you very much. That's it. Okay.
That was really useful for all of us. Okay, we're going to continue with Masters of Science, Maria Teresa Esteban. Literacies for Citizens of this Century. Maria Teresa Esteban, she's a PhD in Education candidate from Universidad Autónoma de Madrid. She holds a Master's of Arts in Language Teaching from Universidad Pedagógica y Tecnológica de Colombia, where she is currently an associate professor working in the Bachelor's in Foreign and Modern Languages programs, and in the Master's of Arts in Language Teaching program. She has written and published different research reports focused on critical thinking and critical literacy regarding language learning and teaching. She belongs to the UAM TEL and Muisuata research groups.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I'm not very good with micros. Yeah, so I always have problem with these ones. So thank you very much. I really appreciate to be here in front of you, sharing what I'm doing, because this is my research study, the one that I'm conducting in my doctoral studies. So it is an honor to be here with some of those ones who were once my students and today are in charge of these events and all this organization, which is not easy, as Russia said, because being here and trying to organize an event as this one is not easy. It's contacting different people, it is organizing different things. It is a pleasure for me to be here. Thank you, Professor Noelia. Thank you, Professor Adriana, for sharing with me, for giving me the possibility to be in front of you, sharing what I'm doing. So, let's start. So this is our agenda. Because of time, we need to move to try to tell you what I'm doing and to try to give you some ideas of what we can do in terms of, as I said before, moving beyond what it is supposed we should do as language teachers. So first of all, we have the statement of the problem, then we have the rationale, briefly, we have the research question and objectives, the theoretical framework, the research design, then I will share with you the results of the first survey that I applied to my students, and then if we have time, I will share with you one of the activities that I have developed so far in my research study, and then some questions and references in terms of moving this activity with you today. So what is the problem? Where my research study emerged. I have been always interested in moving towards critical thinking and critical literacy in my language classroom, because for me, as researcher, as teacher, learning a language is not learning only that language. So learning a language involves learning by means of that language. So that is something in which sometimes we have certain difficulties, because we have been taught in a way that sometimes we consider that is the way in which we should be teaching. So if we were taught by means of simple present, verb to be, present continuous, past perfect, then we consider that that is the way in which our students should learn. And that is something that we need to reevaluate, that probably we need to unlearn, because today we have different possibilities if we are moving towards the communicative language teaching approach, which is not something that we discovered yesterday. Yeah, the communicative language teaching was proposed around the 60s. So today we have more than 40, almost 50, 60 years trying to explore how to move into that communicative approach. But we still are in that structuralist approach in which we consider that it is necessary to teach first the subject, then the verb, and then what is the next one? The complement, yeah? So if we are talking about tenses, then it is necessary to teach our students first the affirmative sentence, then what is the next one? The negative, then what is the next one? It's just the questions, and then WH questions, yes? And then we evaluate, and then we consider that our students are learning English because they are good at using the present perfect. But it was something that was proposed in the structuralist approach of language teaching, which is something that was proposed probably more than 80 years ago. Yeah, those were like the first steps in language teaching. But today we are moving into something that deserves our attention because we have different kids in our language classrooms. They are not the same as we were. They are totally different, and they are immersed in different possibilities where they can learn without having a teacher. So those were some of the things that I considered while I was thinking about what we can do, you know? Teachers, we always complain about the results students show when they are asked to write an argumentative test. My students are not able to write a simple sentence. They are not able to support an idea. I ask them to write a reflective or an argumentative essay, but they don't know what to write. And today, probably we have more complex situations because of the artificial intelligence. Yeah, because probably they are not the ones who are producing it. It is easy. We have ChatGPT in our cell phones, and then we ask, okay, please, I need an essay about this and this and this. And in 1 minute, we have everything. But we are not helping our students to develop their cognitive skills, which are necessary today. The students' ideas are based on what they watch in media or either personal beliefs. So what's your opinion about this? When we ask our students about opinions, sometimes they don't support their ideas. They say, I like this because I watched a movie, and in that movie it was something that happened. Or because it is in TikTok. Or because it was something that a different person said, but not because Maria Teresa is able to support what she said. So today we are living these situations with our students. Well, at least at UPDC. I'm not sure if it happens at Unitropico. The same situation. Okay, so as language teacher, I consider that it is our responsibility as language teachers because we are the ones who are guiding them to read and to write. But what type of reading and what type of writing we are promoting in our language classrooms? Just the structure of the language that we are teaching, or we are taking advantage of that language in order to promote some other critical skills that are connected also to language teaching. So I consider that it is our possibility and it is our responsibility to enhance with our students those critical literacy skills, and in that sense to identify the sources that we have as teachers to develop better and stronger arguments for the text they write, for the speech they have to present or for the discussions they perform in the language classroom. So this is what we have, connecting what we have as language policies in Colombia. Now we have some documents. I don't know if you're familiar with the standards. And in those standards, we have some specific competencies that we should develop. Yeah, so in those standards, it is established that we have to move our students into the development of those cognitive skills that sometimes we don't approach in our language classrooms. So more than teaching the 4 language skills, which are listening, reading, writing, and speaking. Yeah, those are the ones that it is supposed we are developing in our language classrooms with our language students. It is necessary to move into some other cognitive skills. To read not only the word that we have, not the printed texts, but also to read the word. Have you heard about Freire, Giraud, Short, Macedo? We have a big movement around critical literacy. Why critical literacy? According to Pennycook, critical literacy is connected to having into the classroom those moral and political discussions that are necessary to have today. Because today we need more critical more critical citizens, able to make simple decisions as electing our mayors, as electing our presidents. Because that is part of what we do as teachers. It is helping our students to identify those discourses that sometimes are used and that sometimes we don't know how to focus on how to understand them and how to probably like to try to guess what is behind those discourses that sometimes we have. This is what happens in Colombia. Yeah, Colombia is always living different social manifestations because of the violation of diverse rights, social, political, ecological, and economic. Today we are still having those movements. Yeah, those mobilizations that we have in Colombia. Nuestros estudiantes salen a marchar, nuestros profesores hacen paros, nosotros mismos hacemos paros porque no estamos contentos con nada. So, those are situations that we live every day, but most of the times our students are not aware of that reality that is outside the 4 walls of the universities or the 4 walls of the schools. It is as if they were living a different reality inside the university and a different one outside of the university. So it is necessary to connect both. We have a reality that is a single reality, here and outside. As language teachers, it is mandatory to be updated also, taking into account the requirements of this 21st century, which is immersed in the digital era, addressing critical literacy. What are those skills that it is supposed our citizens, the ones of the 21st century, should develop? The competencies or the skills for 21st century citizens. Which are those ones? Have we read about them? No. One of those is critical literacy, critical thinking, knowledge about things. Yeah. All of them are connected to what our citizens, the ones of this century, should develop. So we have like this responsibility as language teacher. And also because I have developed different studies connected to critical literacy and critical thinking. One of them was developed with teacher Adriana when she was one of our students in the university. It was connected to having political cartoons inside the classroom, exploring political cartoons, and for our surprise, although our country was living different situations with this Odebrecht scandal and all those situations connected to those political issues in that time, our students in the university were not aware of them. They didn't know anything about that. So when we started to give them those political cartoons connected to all the bridge and all those situations connected to political issues, they were like, oh my goodness, I didn't have any idea of these situations happening inside our country. So we have a rich field to continue working on. So what is the research question that I have established for this study? It is, what political interest skills emerge or are strong while pre-intermediate level English students analyze the content presented through various types of propaganda. Do we know what propaganda is? No, we have propaganda everywhere. In your cell phones. Each time that you open your cell phone and you are watching a YouTube video, you have propaganda, a type of propaganda. What is that type? Ads. Because they are selling ads. So propaganda, remember that is the art of persuasion. So they are always persuading us. They, who are they? The ones who are behind everything that we have. The ones who are behind the cell phone that you bought. The ones who are behind the jewelry that you bought, because you bought that because of a reason, yeah? A person convinced you to buy it. Your shoes, your watch, your bags, your laptops. Everything that you bought, it was because somebody convinced you to buy it. How? That is what I'm doing with my students. We're trying to understand those techniques that propagandists use in order to sell us a product, to involve us in the consumption of those products. And sometimes without thinking, without having like a real knowledge about what we are doing. And it is not only with the things that we buy, it is with everything we do in our single lives. The objective is also connected to the research question. It is identifying and determining what critical interest skills. So what are those critical interest skills? We have questioning, evaluating, reflecting, analyzing. So more than teaching the 4 skills in language, which are listening, reading, writing, and speaking, the intention is to move our students or my students into the development of some other cognitive skills, such as these ones: reflecting, or reflection, evaluation, criticizing, analyzing, specifically different types of propaganda. And those are the specific objectives. We have this theoretical framework because, okay, it is necessary first of all to clarify what critical literacy is, when we talk about critical literacy skills, what I'm talking about. So according to these authors, critical literacy learning involves students examining the reproduction of inequality and injustice while gaining a critical consciousness to participate in and transform the social worlds. So in our language classroom, it is possible. Why? Because our students are active participants in society. They are not something which is apart from, they are part of what we are doing. So sometimes what we do is to consider our students as not able to think. But what they do, what they produce in the language classroom, when they are provided with the good tools or with the appropriate tools, it is something that sometimes surprises us. Freire and Macedo, which are authors that I have been reading, consider that critical literacy is connected to that active participation of the learner in the construction of a more equitable society, and that dictates a politics of location where learners are positioned to operate as border crossers. So students are not empty vessels, as it was considered in the behaviorism theory of learning. Our students are active agents. When you talk about agency, it is identifying that our students are waiting for that place in the language classroom. So sometimes they are there, but we don't pay attention to what they are able to do. So they are waiting for the teacher to push them to do something. to not only to learn the language, but to transform society by means of that language, which is possible by means of the different activities and the different research studies that we can conduct with them. Critical literacy is connected to those critical skills that I was mentioning before. So it is not only reading a text and reporting what the text is about. So who was the main author? Who was the main character? Who is the author? What is the main idea? No, it is moving beyond the lines in order to understand what the text is not showing explicitly. It is trying to read between lines. And that is what happens today in society. That sometimes what they show us by means of media is something that is not presented as it is. It has an implicit intention. So helping our students to develop those critical literacy skills is probably helping to have a better society, not today, but probably in some years. Citizens able to read the world in a more critical way, which is necessary today. Why propaganda? As I said before, propaganda is everywhere. So we have propaganda in our cell phones, we have propaganda while we are watching the news, we have propaganda when we are watching the news. So we have propaganda in the news. When we listen to Vicky Davila, when we listen to all of them talking about what we know they talk about, they are propagandists because they are serving a major goal. And it is necessary to understand what is that, what is behind, what is what they are telling us, and what are the reasons they are having for doing that. So in terms of moving into that, I decided to explore propaganda. So we have different types of propaganda, and advertising is one. Yeah, so that is the first workshop that I have developed with my students connected to that. But we have developed more workshops connected to different types of propaganda. But because of time problem, we are going to develop just a piece of one. Transactional reading is probably one of the possibilities that we have in the classroom, because transactional reading involves that interaction with the text and also with the reader. So it is not only the reader, it is not only the text, it is a transaction that we have. Similar to what we do when we go to the bank. Yeah, we do transactions. We have money, receive money, we change the money. So the situation is similar. We have the test, we take the test, we do something with the test, and then we produce a new text. So that is what we are doing with my students. And meaning is more important than, remember the meaning is connected to what Noonan established as task-based approach, which is connected to communicative language teaching. In communicative language teaching, we have task-based language teaching. And in task-based language teaching, language is important, but the most important is meaning. What we can construct with what we are receiving or learning. Please. So this is a research design. This is like the summary, 5 minutes. Oh my goodness. So please move. And these are the results of the survey. So first I told you it was necessary. Those were the things that I was thinking about. Yeah, so that is what Maria Teresa believed. I considered that it was necessary to help my students to become more critical readers, but that is something that I believed in that moment. So I decided to implement a survey in order to see if what I was thinking was true or not. So the first thing was to apply a survey. That is what we do as researchers, yeah, to try to understand our population and to know what they know. So the first thing was to apply a survey with some questions. One question was connected to what do you understand by critical literacy? Another one was connected to what do you understand by propaganda? So for them, propaganda, which was one of the questions that I did, and some of you probably said, okay, I have an idea, but I don't have like a proper definition. So that was the same situation with my students, yeah? For some of them, it was connected to publicity. yeah, to those ads that we watch every single day and everywhere. It is also connected to self-palettes, which is totally true. Remember that propagandists use propaganda to convince us to buy something. Lo necesitemos o no. Communicate an idea, and finally to influence, which is the part that caught my attention because some students were able to identify that propagandists have that power. As Littman said, in propaganda, we all are considered as the be wilder herd, el rebaño despistado. We, all of us, are considered as the be wilder herd, needed to be led by our nose. So my intention with this study is to try to show my students that we are more than that. We are not a wilder herd. We know your intentions and we know how to confront them. And we know how to respond to them. So, it was the definition that they gave to critical literacy. So for some of them, not idea. 28%, they said, I don't have any idea about what critical literacy is. It was connected to moving beyond or going beyond the simple reading, which is connected to that. So it is not just reading what we have, it is trying to understand what the reading is trying to tell us, interpreting and analyzing, which are those which are connected to critical literacy skills. And this is one, please, the other one. This is one of the lessons that I have implemented so far. It was the first lesson in which I was moving around something that I identified and that had been proposed by different theoreticians regarding critical literacy approach, and it is the empowerment spiral. It was taking up, the first one is the warming up, and we have, in this one, I have only the awareness and the analysis activities, but we have also the taking action, the reflection, the evaluation, and the production. So this is the first one, the first workshop in which the first intention was to move our students into that knowledge of what we watch every single day. So I used 2 short videos in order to give them one idea of what ads are able to do, but keeping in mind those questions. The last ones. Who created this message? What creative techniques are used to attract my attention? How might people understand the message differently? What values, lifestyles, and points of view are presented or omitted from this message? Why is this message being sent? Is it possible to play it? This is one of the videos. It was in terms of understanding ads production. So we are going, I think that we are familiar with Alexa, yeah, the device. So please, let's watch it.
It's just flawless, isn't it? I think so. I literally couldn't imagine a more beautiful vessel for Alexa to be inside. Alexa, how many tablespoons are in a cup?
There are 16 tablespoons in the cup. Babe, food's got here. Why are you looking? Who's that?
Alexa, turn on the sprinklers.
Honey, I already ran the sprinklers. Things are getting way too wet around here.
Alexa, dim the lights.
Like the lights up. Like the lights up.
Add back oil to my shopping.
Alexa, no. Don't do that.
Read me out of it.
I was innocent. I was being changed. But I was also kissed. Honey, you about to use the bathroom around here too.
Okay, what could you see? What could you see behind this? He was what? Okay, so as we can see, we have here an example of propaganda, which is an ad. Yeah, and with this ad, we can involve our students into those analyses that probably can help us to develop a different type of reading. It is not reading the common text that we have, which is, okay, you need to read this novel, you need to read this book, and then you have to present the oral report, or you need to present an oral presentation. Now it is involving them into the analysis of these videos that sometimes we consider they are not affecting us, but they are affecting us. In that case, she was connecting Alexa with what? With a famous person, yeah? She was like believing that because she can buy Alexa, she's going to have also that handsome man with her, yeah? And that is something that happens with us, specifically with some other ads. If we pay attention to Coca-Cola, that is the drink of what? If you happiness, yeah? If you drink Coca-Cola, you are immediately happy. So those are ideas that sometimes we receive and we repeat and we repeat, and we are part of that be wider herd without knowing, or probably without being like aware of what we are doing and we are reproducing. So the intention is to move students into the analysis of, okay, this was one of the workshops, we have some other ones in which students have been exploring different possibilities and different propaganda techniques, because it is necessary to tell them about those propaganda techniques, to know more about that issue, and to be able to develop those critical literacy skills that I expect to help them to develop. At the end of the workshop, it was asked them to produce a short poster in which they invited their partners to be a little bit more aware of the ads they watched. So we have some examples of those posters that they created, and also I used a Padlet in which they had the possibility to write about the activity that we were developing. So first, okay, so those are the posters that my students created. And although they are short sentences, probably they have more meaning than when we are asking them to write a simple sentence in present simple. And finally, we have the Padlet with the QR. I don't know if you have the QR. In this QR, you can explore the Padlet that was created for giving them more possibilities to interact with their partners, talking about the video, talking about the ads, the posters they were creating, because they were also creating ads in a different workshop. So in a Padlet, they had the possibility to write and to contrast their ideas, and also to discuss about what the other partners were saying or writing about the same topic. So sorry, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor. As we established, so... No, yeah, like 5 minutes for questions. I don't know if anybody who wants to ask a question for Professor Maria Teresa. Maybe a student. We got a question over there.
So it's not really a question, but rather a comment that I've got out of your presentation that you just did. But first, thank you for having this amazing presentation. For me, it was particularly special because it has triggered something in my practical as a teacher. I'm a graduate from this as well as you too. And let's say that out of my experience, especially when it comes to talk about curriculum designing, and now that you mentioned critical literacy, I think that that is something that we must include into our curriculum designing. As you were speaking about the morals, and let's say trying to teach our students to be more critical about the context that we have in our country, having in mind that our country is going to ups and downs all the time. So that is something that as teachers, I think, as and institutions, we're missing out that part. Because let's say that we focus, let's say, our teaching practice on the fact of, let's say, creating or promoting the linguistic competence in our students. But we should also think on what you just said about critical literacy. I think that that is something that I liked a lot from your presentation. And it's just that I wanted to comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I really appreciate your comment. Yeah, it is not easy. I know that is not easy because it is like trying to living what we have believed for a long, long time, that it is necessary to teach first the system. So if my students don't know the system, then they are not going to be able to communicate. But that's something that needs to be reevaluated, because we are talking about approaches in language teaching, and today we have different students. Probably they don't learn, not because they are not able to learn. Probably they don't learn because they don't find something to do with what they are learning. If we give them more meaning, or provide them with more meaningful activities, more connected to what they are outside the classroom, probably they are going to get a better understanding of what language or learning a language means. So it is not only learning the language, it is learning by means or learning through that language. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Lee.
Okay, so we have a break time. I think it's around 10 minutes break. It's, yeah, 10 minutes. It's 10:10, so we'll be right back at 10:20. Our next presentation is our Professor Noelia. So you're going to be next. So we'll be right back at 10:20. You can have a cup of coffee. Huh? Yeah, outside there is a cup of coffee for all of you. Afuera, cafecito para que se refresquen un poco.
Great. Mr. Abril.
Esto sí.
Mañana muy seguro, todo es cierto. Sí, lo mismo. Yo trabajé en mensajes de como 2 meses. Y yo porque ahora soy la carcelera. Sí, no, también estás cambiando. Eso que somos novios.
Eso.
Estás traicionando a no. Consuelo. Ella está. Ah,
Y mi esposo también.
eso es un poliamor. Esa es una. Claro que sí. Bueno, ¿cómo estás?
Claro que sí.
Porque es hecho
¿Me gustan las fotos? Ya me di cuenta. Esto, 1, 2, 5. Eso.
Ay, otra vez. Ay, no, no lleva así. Sí. Y ya. Y el grupo de ser para que de dichos
Estoy en la campaña, pero es de una no, porque ya se y hace ese tercero. Ya somos ¿no? No vuelvo a nada de eso. Pero nadie se digamos, muy bien, pues sí. Nada. Nada, eso es muy para eso. Hola. Bien, antes de continuar con nuestra cuota institucional, les recordamos que el día de mañana, miércoles, va a haber un taller de inteligencia artificial para la enseñanza del inglés a las 3:30 de la tarde en el salón 105A, dirigido por la profesora Inglés. Y ahí está el código QR para que porfa lo escaneen si quieren participar, llenar porfa la lista de asistencia. El código QR está en la asistencia de la gente de mañana, taller.
Ready to explore the sky. I need you to listen, I need you to hear. Trying to protect your soul.
I think the audience can move a little bit closer. We can sit a bit closer. Les recordamos que el día de mañana a las 3:30 de la tarde va a haber un taller aquí en el salón 105A, en el bloque A, sobre inteligencia artificial para la enseñanza del inglés, liderado por nuestra ponente Gracia. Entonces, para que escaneen el código QR y por favor se inscriban al taller. The audience, you can move a little bit closer. Profe Leonardo, más aquí, más cerca, por favor. Profe, aquí más cerca, los invitamos a que se sienten más cerquita aquí de nosotros. Bien, continuamos con nuestra cuota local e institucional. Tenemos a la profe Noelia Parra con su ponencia A Way to Foster Cultural Sensitivity in University Transversal English Courses, Universidad Internacional del Trópico Americano. Noelia Parra, she holds a bachelor's degree in modern languages and a master's degree in political science, both from the University of Los Andes in Venezuela. She is currently an EFL assistant professor at Unitropico. She has also worked as an EFL, International Relations and Intercultural Communication professor at universities in Venezuela. She has participated as a lecturer in different Ventiso events and national and international academic events in interculturality and international politics. She is a researcher in investigation groups and centers from Venezuela and Colombia. She has also published several papers and books about interculturality and international relations. Let's give a welcome to Noelia.
Hi. Well, for me as an organizer of this event, it's a really pleasure to be here today. Let me tell you a little bit about my path in relation to cultural studies and intercultural studies. I started to teach intercultural communication in 2016. I was part of the professor's staff
at University of Los Andes. By the way, my former professor, Yadira, is here. She was my reading and writing professor. And she was the director of the school when I started working there. So I remember that. So it's special to have you here and to have you like part of this event. Thank you so much. So when it comes to EFL teaching, I have reached a conclusion. And it is that we give culture for granted when we teach languages. What do I mean? We believe that by teaching about food, music, customs, we are teaching culture. But I have a question. When you teach about food, music, and customs, what countries do you focus in? The US and Great Britain, right? Fish and chips, Thanksgiving, pumpkin pie, and all of that, which I think is a contradiction because we are part of third world countries, and as third world countries, I think that we have to consider, when it comes to culture, of course, the teaching of English from a non-dominant perspective. So I want us to do something very quickly. It is, well, this is the agenda. I'm not going to focus on that because of a matter of time. So let's test. Don't feel judged. I usually tell this to my students, don't feel judged. It's only an exercise. So where do you think, or which countries do you think these names are from? You know them, right? You're familiar with them. Yes. James, Liam, Emma, Theodore. So, which countries do you think they're from? Ireland. Colombia? Well, in some cases, yes. I have a James in my class. Yeah. The US, James, right? Can you please go to the next one? Which countries are these names from? Do you know how to pronounce it? These names are from English-speaking Caribbean countries, from the Middle East and from the north of Africa. But we never integrate these names in our classes, right? Okay, please. Now, I have a question. When you teach aspects like pronunciation, which approach do you consider? Do you teach your students how to sound native-like, but native-like like an American, like a British? Yeah, and we, as teachers, make an effort to sound like people from these countries, right? Now, who includes literature in their classes? Do you usually include something about literature? Yeah? Yeah? Which authors?
Authors. Yeah.
Okay, could you please go to the next? Do you know who they are? Do you know their Wilde? Of course, Oscar Wilde. Who doesn't know Oscar Wilde? And Derek Wilde, you know who he is? He's a Saint Lucian poet who got the Nobel Prize Award in 1992, and he writes in English. So, how aware we are of the cultural richness we have in English-speaking countries that are part of the non-dominant nations? So, don't feel judged, I repeat. Do you think that we are really aware, or at least we try to include these topics in our classes? What do you think? What is like the first thing that comes to your mind? When teaching, for example, pronunciation, do we consider the pronunciation variations, for example, from English-speaking countries from Asia or the Caribbean? No, right? Because unfortunately, there is a tendency, and the tendencies are starts since the moment we are students of foreign languages programs. So I think that we need to start debunking like that idea that everything that comes from the West is the best, because there is something else. There is always something else. Now, we're lucky because we teach foreign languages, and the foreign language classroom gives us a unique opportunity to integrate cultural awareness. And as an educator, I do consider that integrating cultural topics in our classroom is an imperative, is a must. Why? Well, because language is a medium to express culture. When we teach a language, we teach a way of thinking. And that is why sometimes when we teach grammar and the students don't get it, it is because we are approaching a different way of thinking in the language, right? Now, culture is directly related to diversity. Yes, but that diversity can be national or international. We sometimes forget about the diversity of our own countries, and that is something important to consider. Diversity is also one of the main characteristics of societies nowadays. We were talking about migration. We were talking about international movements, but also, I repeat, we need to consider the diversities of our own countries. When we promote diversity, awareness, and respect in our classroom, we are encouraging social justice. Professor Grazia was talking about that. In which way? Because we teach our students about social struggles, history, the history of segregation of some minority groups, for example. And ultimately, if we reach to build peaceful nations, then students and future graduates will serve as dialogue promoters who are sensitive, most of all sensitive to cultural issues. Now, what is the concept? I took this concept from Francis and Nakayama. Francis and Nakayama are two authors that I always consider when I teach intercultural communication. And they say that cultural sensitivity can be defined as the awareness and understanding of different cultural identities. We can say that if we want to promote intercultural competences, all students need to go through a process of being sensitive towards or in relation to some topics. Now, what is our context? This is very important. I have to tell you that this is a proposal that I have been applying since the beginning of this semester. So this is an ongoing course. I don't have results yet, but I can reach some conclusions so far that are important. Now, what is the main focus here? We teach English as a transversal subject. So we don't have a foreign languages program. Basically, what we do is to foster, develop a little bit the communication skills from students. What is the level that they reach, that a graduate reach, a B1 level? And important, since the university transformed into a public institution more than 2 years ago, the school started to propose some updates, and within these updates, we have integrated intercultural competences. So when I started this semester, I started to reflect on the way in which I could teach and approach cultural studies, considering the context of teaching, but also the socio-economic context of the students, which is very important. And it takes me to the challenges. What are the challenges that we face? Well, in relation to the language level, something really important, it is the socio-economic context of the students. They come from small towns, far away municipalities in which the conditions are really bad. And we have another challenge, and it is a university context. As we are not part of the main subjects that they have to go through, then there is a lack of interest. English is not that important. So if English is not that important, of course, there is a lack of interest and motivation to learn about culture. So, how can we deal with that in the proper way to motivate students to learn about that? Well, that's something that
we're going to talk about later on. Something important, and it is not only a challenge that we have here at Unitropico. This is a challenge that we have in Latin America. All the misconceptions and stereotypes that I have on others. Let's only think about immigrants. Let's think about African descendants, about indigenous communities. What are the misconceptions and stereotypes that we have on them? And finally, something that I was, on my question for Professor Grazzi. We need to change, and I needed to change my approach of teaching. And I needed to integrate bilingualism, although I didn't feel comfortable with that, because I was taught to teach in the target language. So, to allow myself to do that, it entailed a reflection and also an effort, because you know what? I didn't know at the beginning how to teach in English and Spanish. It is a challenge. And I think that it has worked. And as it has worked, I think that the only thing we have to know is how to approach bilingualism in the appropriate way. Okay, the class. This class is an English 4 course. Here we have 6 levels. So in an English 4 class, the students are finishing the A2 level. It's a small group. I only have 7 students. Only one is a male, which you might think, oh, it's nice because women are more sensitive. Not really. And then the language level is heterogeneous. There are some students who have a really good competence in speaking and writing, and we can say that there are some others which level is a little bit weaker. But I think that it is also an advantage, because I think that the students with more level usually push the others to become better. And finally, the different socioeconomic backgrounds. I have students who come from private schools, from Casanare and from Boyacá. I have students who come from small towns here in Casanare or small municipalities. So I think it is a challenge, because we can say that as their histories have been different, the way they approach topics is completely different too. Okay, what are the teaching methods in relation to EFL? The first one, it is content-based instruction. Content-based instruction is basically organizing your classes in relation or related or looking for teaching a topic. While, of course, you develop, in a way, the language competence of the students. All the topics that I included as part of this project have to do with cultural and social issues. What are the resources? Presentations, articles, really short articles, because remember that they are A2 students. So we have to be really careful with the selection of the resources. Some videos, documentaries, of course everything in the target language, that is English. And of course the sessions in which we study about cultural topics are based on the explanation and the reflection made by students. Bilingualism. In which way I have included bilingualism in my classes? We can say that this is faithful to what I have done with the group. All teaching resources are developed in English. So something different to what you did, right, with Paraguay, yeah. Because the resources were in the native language. But in this case, as the focus is like to work on the topics, but also to work on the language competences. Then the explanation. Sometimes this number varies. Sometimes it's 50-50. Sometimes it's 60 English, 40 Spanish. Sometimes classes are 100% taught in English. Debates and reflections are usually developed in English and Spanish, but I had an agreement with the students. Yeah, you are allowed to speak in Spanish, but all your outcomes need to be done in English. That is the target language. And I'm going to show you some examples and some outcomes. Now, important, the approach for developing resources that was central. this is key for me. When I started to think about the approach or the proper approach, considering the context of my students, well, I decided to focus on 3 stages. Some are the most important developmental models. They say that we should go through 6, 7 different stages. But remember that the only thing I wanted to do was to reach sensitivity and awareness, not to reach the behavior that is related with the competence. Now, in the first stage, well, to promote curiosity, to investigate, to research, to know a little bit more about the target group, to interpret and make relations about the cultural symbols, the stories, the historical patterns that some specific groups have gone through. And finally, something that Professor Maria Teresa was speaking about, to reach critical thinking, which is really, really complicated, because as I told you, students are not empty beings. They have experiences that are that they have lived before, but also, you know what, they have stereotypes that have been built by the community in which they have lived most of their lives. Part of this resources development has to do a lot with my own academic training and experience. I have a degree in modern languages, but I also work with international politics. And within international politics, I have been able to work with globalization issues, which I think is a tremendous opportunity, has given me a tremendous opportunity to develop an academic part that is interdisciplinary. And for me, I think that it has been really rich and enriching for my teaching process. So, as part of this interdisciplinary dialogue, the main focus of the resources that I have developed consider history and social struggles from the groups that we study about. One very important part of these resources is the work that the students do in relation to the self-awareness they have on their own identity, but also something that we call in intercultural communication, that is the authorization theory. That is the way I see others, to reflect on the way I see others, but also on the way that others really are. So we start debunking and deconstructing previous ideas. And this is central. The perspective I have on addressing cultural issues is from a non-dominant English-speaking teaching perspective. I rarely focus on teaching about American or British culture. At least I am working with a minority group like African Americans, for example. Now, do you know about Catro's concentric circle? This is very important. According to this author, the spread and the use of English is based on 3 circles. The inner circle, that are dominant countries in which English is a native language, mainly the US and Great Britain. Then we have the outer circle, that is countries in which English, because of the history of colonization, became a second language and part of the official languages that people speak there. And finally, we have the expanded circle, that is countries in which English is spoken as a second or foreign language. So where is Colombia? In which circle? In the expanded circle. So if we are coherent with our position in relation to the use of English, we need to approach the teaching of this language from a critical perspective. And that critical perspective, as I said before, has to do with debunking the traditional approach of teaching English. You can call it pronunciation, you can call it literature, you can call it music, you can call it food. But I really invite you to start considering the diversity and the richness of these non-dominant speaking countries, because they are really, really rich and amazing. Now, about the resources. Well, I basically used 4 different types of identities. national identity, race identity, sex, gender identity, and sexual identity. What are the activities that we have developed so far? The first one was to create a story about a Pakistani girl. The other one was, and I think it was like the tougher one for them because they really needed to research on African Americans, and it was, remember they are A2 students, right? So what was the outcome for them? To write a paragraph. And in this case, a reflective paragraph based on the main topics that they got from the documentary Amendment 13. They also have us speaking about their own identities. They had a presentation and a comment on English Caribbean literature, related to a specific type of poetry, which name is dog poetry. And I'm going to show you a video of that. And finally, we integrated a Colombian topic. We studied and analyzed the story, and we can say like the path of this transgender community, Las Traviesas. Do you know what Las Traviesas? They are located in Greece, Aralda. And they have had a lot of problems because they are transgender, are part of an indigenous community. They were expelled from their communities because they are transgender. But as they were expelled, they don't have an indigenous community ID or a Colombian ID. So they don't belong to a community or to the nation, the country, the state. And it was really nice. All the material that we got for this activity was taken from an exhibition that you can find at Museo Nacional that is really, really nice. Now, this was the activity about the Pakistani girl. It was basically to create a story on a person that comes from a country that has a specific gender, but that is really similar to them. What was the question? Which can be her life purposes? A simple question, but a question that needed a lot of reflection from students. This was more about the self-awareness activity in which the students were aimed to think about the way that they are represented. And the final question is, it was really interesting, and we're gonna read some answers that I got from them. Is the way you want to be represented faithful to your own identity? And it was a really nice activity, you know, because I think that students felt that they were in a safe place and a safe zone. And they spoke about a lot of issues related to their identities, like their families, their gender identity, their sexual identity. So engaging the students and promoting or allowing the students to feel comfortable and in a safe zone is key if you want to talk about or if you want to approach these topics. Because if they don't feel comfortable, I think that some of the activities are gonna be useless in a way. This was the activity that we made on English Caribbean literature, focusing on dog poetry. Do you know dog music? No? It's similar to reggae music, but we can say that it is a little bit slower, but they talk about the same topics. Colonization, segregation, being a Creole, and all of these topics that are really recurrent in the English, not in the English, in the Caribbean in general terms. So these were some of the questions posed at the end of the class for students. But I want you to, please, I want you to watch this video. Linton Kwesi Johnson, he was part of the Black Panthers, the US. He's a Jamaican poet, and we can say that he was one of the main characters behind the birth of what dog poetry is. So this is a very short video that I'm going to show you, and I want you to pay attention to something. The title of the poem in the first place. If I was a top-notch poet. What it means to be a top-notch poet. Do you know? To be the best. But do you think that an English-speaking Caribbean person can be a top-notch poet? Complicated, right? Because of what we already talked about. So I want you to pay attention to two details: the topics in the poem and also the way in which he speaks in English.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would love to bring to the stage
a poem in defense of dub poetry called If I Was a Top-Notch Poet. If I was a top-notch poet, like Christopher Kickbo, Derek Walcott, or T.S. Eliot, I would write a poem so damn deep that it's bittersweet. Like a precious memory will make you weep, will make you feel incomplete. Like when you love and leave, and though defeat you concede till you beg and you plead, till you win a reprieve and you're ready to rock steady, but the music done already. Still, in the meantime, with me rhythm,
It sounds like a reggae song, right? It has a different rhythm. And he mentioned some top English poets. So we can say that it is one poem of protest. And that poem of protest comes from a very particular place, and it is to be an English poet that comes from the Caribbean. Now,
ladies and gentlemen, I would love
some of the outcomes related to these activities. In this case, students were reflecting on this. Why do people from certain countries tend to control the impressions people from other countries have on them? And here we were talking about identity development and the fact that they are Colombian and how they believed they were going to be represented in an English-speaking country like the US. Student one said, because they know the concept that other people have about them and know how that concept could affect the form that others see them. You can see that it is a very limited language competence, but still you can get along and understand what they mean. Look at the answer given by student 2. Because of the stigmatization they may have on their country, its population, and the social context in general, that might not be very favorable. Next, please. Yeah, I think we can move to the next one, because I think, yeah. So, the statement says, mention the ways in which your life's conditions or experiences have been different or similar from the ones of African Americans. And it was like the last activity that they did in relation to that documentary that I told you about. Student, in relation to the differences, the student said, although I have passed difficult situations, I have had it all for my necessities. So all necessities covered. And similarity, it was really interesting for me to read this answer. In my school, I suffered bullying and discrimination. In general, like a woman, I feel vulnerable. So you can see they can find a common story. And this is something really important. And in this case, I want to connect this with some final comments. Remember that this is an ongoing course. I cannot fully analyze the results yet, but so far I can tell you that the students are more aware. More aware of what? Of their own identity, and also they're more aware about the others' identities. They are also kind of aware about the social and cultural struggles from some specific groups. Some groups that come from other countries and some groups that come from their own country. They also have some understanding of minority groups. They still have a limited understanding on identity issues. I mean, they can reflect and they can think of that, but remember that as the class cannot be developed fully in Spanish, there are still some issues that has to do with the limited language competence to discuss and research about the different topics that we cover. you know what, I think that it has been definitely the most important outcome. They have created closer interactions and relations. Closer interactions and relations with other students, but also with the teacher. Because if they don't feel comfortable with who you are and the way you teach and the way you approach these topics, then I think it has no sense to approach, teach about cultural issues in your classes. So far, in the case of my teaching experience, I think that it has given me, and I think for sure it's going to give me the opportunity to adjust and improve the resources. Remember, it was the first trial. And also remember that in the next semesters, for sure, I'm going to have a different audience. And you have to adapt your resources and your approaches, for sure. Maybe next semester, I can fully teach in English. Or maybe the use of bilingualism is going to be a little bit more intense. I don't know, but you know what? I definitely think that we have started to do something. And we have started to build a very important competence that we, I repeat, give for granted when teaching foreign languages. And it is to teach students and to promote in them how to be more competent from a cultural perspective. So, thank you so much. That's all.
We have 5 minutes. 5 minutes for questions, for doubts. Alejo has a question over here.
Okay, thank you very much for the talk. It was very interesting. But I think that I see a very clear line between the presentation of Gracia and Maria Teresa and Noelia. They talk about agency, critical thinking, and cultural sensitivity, which are clearly very much linked in our daily life as teachers. What I see is that these previous ideas that we had about teaching that connect with the idea of the native speaker. The native speakers are good teachers. You know, I mean, actually, in Colombia and I think all over Latin America, they had this idea that if you were a native speaker, you were a teacher, which is kind of weird. We don't think about we don't think that of other subjects. Just because you speak Spanish, you don't teach Spanish. But in English, it so happened. And also the idea that we needed textbooks to teach English, and textbooks that were made in the United States or in the United Kingdom. And it is very, very, very important business line for these countries. So introducing these new ideas of agency, critical thinking, and cultural sensitivity gives us the opportunity to put new topics in our classes that are quite interesting. Sexual identity, political identity, cultural identity that are very important. Do you see a link between those business approaches and the development of new methods?
Definitely. But you know what? I think that sometimes it is, as we are used to having textbooks, it is really complicated for us to start building up our own resources. It takes time. It takes a lot of time. You cannot imagine. But I think that we can start integrating them into our own resources. Because you know what? I think that it also takes into account a very important variation that we never consider, and it is the teacher's identity. As a teacher, I have an identity. I come from an academic training that is quite different to Gracias, Pa, to Professor Mendoza's Pa, and so on. So I think that it also gives us the opportunity to teach by being faithful to who we are. And yes, definitely, I think that it works. It's complicated. It takes time. I mean, developing a cultural competence is not something that happens in months. It is a long process. But I think that, yeah, it is quite more convenient than using the same Cambridge and Oxford books that are nonsense in a way.
All right, next presentation we have specialist Carlos Salazar, Emotional Education in English Curriculum. He's a retired teacher from Centro Social School. He holds a degree in modern languages from the University of Caldas and a specialization in linguistics applied to the teaching of English from the Gran Colombia University. Retired teacher from Centro Social School, where he taught English, French, and Spanish for 34 years. English teacher at SENA for 4 years, and English professor from Universidad Pedagógica y Tecnológica de Colombia and UNISANI. Welcome, teacher.
Okay. It's not the usual question. How are you? How are you? Now my question is, how do you feel? Because I am going to talk about emotions. Okay. Thanks a lot to Noelia, to Unitopico University. I am very happy to have here students, young students from our school, from the park. It is not common to have here in these activities young people, but welcome. I hope that you enjoy and you take advantage of this speech. When you get older, more than 60, doors are closed for you. I think because I retired from teaching 6 years ago. I have time to go to events like this, and you are a retired teacher. They think we don't have anything to say, but Unitopico opened the doors for me. Thanks a lot. Okay, letter to a teacher, students from Barbiana School. Please raise your hand. Teachers who have read this book, a letter to a teacher. Nobody? Okay, I suggest you to read. The letter to a teacher was written by 8 students, but as if only one student. They went to a farm, to a country school with Father Milani. They were rejected from the schools, and at another school, they had the opportunity that the schools didn't give them. Chinese have been with me all my life. As a little boy, I used to keep my eyes on the ground. I would creep around the walls in order not to be seen. One phrase. What does it mean for you? Perhaps we as teachers have done this, to reject, to ignore situations like this. Okay. Emotion refers to a positive or negative response that human beings make to external things, which is generated by an individual's internal feelings and experience. Rafael Vizquerra is a Spanish teacher who is specialized in emotional education. Okay, emotions are key constructs related to psychological and well-being satisfaction with life. Emotion decides and reasons justifies. I don't know who is your relationship with your mother-in-law. When you are discussing with your mother-in-law, you are thinking with reason, but your mother-in-law is with passion and emotion. And passion and emotion always gain to reason. Sure, I don't know, perhaps. Okay. Historically, emotions have been seen as separate from thoughts, separate from actions, and separate from acts. In class, we don't pay attention to emotion. But Aristotle, many years ago, said, educating the mind without educating the heart is not education at all. The balance must be. It is necessary to have the balance between the brain and the heart. You can only see with your heart what is essentially invisible to the eyes. I know that you have read The Little Prince from Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. This book has a lot of pedagogical things to analyze. And Francisco Mora, another Spanish teacher, says, you can only learn what you love. If you don't love what you do, teachers, if you don't love your profession, you are not very good teachers, sure. Please. Emotions are part of what makes us human. We experience a rainbow of emotions through our lives. Emotions are only present in everyday life, and throughout one's entire life. When you were born, you have emotions. You have been a child, a young, an adult, now as a teacher, and you have emotions. You experiment emotions. Emotions, according to Roberto Aguado, says, emotions, fear, joy, sadness, disgust, anger, surprise. These 6 emotions were studied by Salovey and Mayer, and Daniel Goleman took advantage of this work from Salovey and Mayer to write your book. Do you know the book of Daniel Goleman? Inteligencia emocional. Okay. Dice una pedagoga española, Mar Romera, Salovey y Mayer, listos los que investigaron, y Daniel Goleman, el listillo, que escribió para vender libros y para trabajar. Así pasa, muchas veces. Ok, and then Roberto Aguado integrated curiosity, security, admiration, and guilt. So we have 10 main emotions. Noelia talked about in Unitropico to try to work with the students with curiosity. It is very important. Okay. Emotional education is an educational strategy that tries to improve the quality of life of students through the development of emotional skills. Lucas Malaysi is an Argentinian psychologist. He was in Colombia in 2016 in a National Congress of Education, and the ministry of that time said us there that in Colombia we were going to implement emotional education, but time passed and nothing about this. Lucas Malaysi had written more or less 8 books about emotional education. He implemented in Argentina emotional education in every school, but only in 5 Argentina is divided not by departments, but by province. In 5 provinces, emotional education is working with all students. Okay, emotional education is based or is working in order to acquire emotional competencies in students, teachers, and parents, but are based in emotional intelligence. If we integrate emotional education, emotional competence, and emotional intelligence, we are going to have a real emotional education. But we need emotional intelligence in order to understand, and so we can work with emotional education. Emotional education teaches people about feelings, to know emotions, to communicate the meaning of the emotions, to express the emotions, to influence how you feel, to express. I know that we grew up in a society where men don't cry. Men couldn't express this emotion. All the students need to identify the emotion, to understand, to express, to manage stress, to use the emotions, to increase the effectiveness of thinking, decision-making, and actions. If you have students bored in your classes, they are not going to learn. If you have students who hate your classes, your English classes, they are not going to learn. Sure. In our English classes, teaching emotional education should play a particularly important role. Lacks motivation, weak self-confidence, high anxiety. An English teacher must be capable to forward some teaching suggestions and to how alleviate the students' anxiety and improve students' confidence and positive motivation in emotional education. I know that you in your classes, perhaps someday you have a student who is isolated. No, my question is, do you have time to ask this student, what do you feel? What's up with you? No, it doesn't matter. It's your problem. I have to go on because I have 40 students and you are only 1 student. I don't have time for him. The others are most important for me. Take attention, pay attention to this teacher. Okay, for a long time, English teachers have been focusing on how to improve students' academic performance, while paying little or no attention to a student's emotional experience in learning a foreign language. For a student, it's not easy because he comes from your social context speaking Spanish. He arrives to the school and perhaps the curiosity, but when he or she cannot learn, he is going to be frustrated. Emotions are often in class: enjoyment of learning, fear, sadness, anger, pride, anxiety, disgust, shame, or boredom. Are we interested in studying emotions? It's a question for you, teachers. Do we have time to work with emotions? Are we aware that emotion and cognitive are inseparable? We pay attention, a lot of attention, to cognitive aspect. Emotion and cognitive are inseparable. In the last slide, I took the question, do you have time to pay attention to emotions? But we have to pay attention to this. This is more important for our principals, for our coordinator, and perhaps for parents. We have to pay attention to curriculum, to diseño, to programación, to evaluación, interdisciplinaridad, reforma, didáctica, estándares, malla curricular, plan de mejoramiento. And the student, where is the student? Oh my God, poor boy. Okay. Content and language integrated with emotions in the course content appears as a promising solution in order to work on emotional skills without delaying the work on the classroom curricula. Students' emotions during English class depend on the classmate, relationships with classmates, difficulty of tasks, success in learning, teacher's supportive attitude toward language. Some students might feel uneasy or be bored as English learners when they have to memorize vocabulary or to learn grammar structure and find it difficult. Some students claim to have a mental block against learning English. In many cases, they may have an anxiety reaction and find foreign language learning, especially in classroom situations, particularly stressful. This comes from Frato. Do you know Frato perhaps? No? Nobody? Francesco Tonucci, an Italian pedagogue. He is alive. He is older than me, so it means a lot. Francesco Tonucci, a pedagogue, is the main defender of the child. He wrote the book, The City of the Children, La Ciudad de los Niños, traducida a muchos idiomas. Colombia está afiliado al programa de Tonucci, Bogotá. Sin embargo, no es Bogotá, olvidado de los niños. I think we could learn without having to hate what we study. I said before, it's impossible to learn. Do you hate? Perhaps English or perhaps the teacher. It's harder. It is helpful to be able to distinguish emotions and name them in order to understand. We need to know emotions, 10 emotions. Okay. I know that you have felt many emotions, perhaps today, perhaps in this moment. Perhaps some of you in this moment are bored, but perhaps some are with curiosity. What happens in your body, for example, when you are scared, when you are angry, your beat changes, the color of your face, the size of your eyes, okay, with surprise, for example, with fear, with anger. Okay. How does my heart beat? Perhaps. Okay, all these situations. Please continue. English curriculum should put forward the cultivation goal of emotional attitude and emphasize the positive emotional education for students. Excessive anxiety will make students too nervous, consume their energy that could be used for memory and to learn English. Another from Prato. The teachers dream with the students quiet in the classroom, paying attention to the explanation. Prato says, one day, the desk will come. Perhaps. The mathematics teacher used. No. It's an acronym. Ruler exists to develop teachers and educators develop their own emotional competence and teach emotional competence to children from kindergarten through high school. This is ruler. Ruler, recognizing the emotion. To recognize you, teacher, you need to recognize your emotions and students' emotions. To understand the student who is presenting, who is, for example, angry, worried, I don't know, scared, leveling, expressing and regulating. Regulating or managing, but for the acronym we say regulating. In Spanish it is very used to say gestionar las emociones. Okay. With questions like this in our classes, not as I started my speech, not only saying, good morning, how are you? Fine, thanks. And every day the same. We can change. For example, when we in our classes are working by groups, you go to a group and you are going to ask the students, how do you feel today? Are you okay? Is everything? What's wrong with you? What's the matter? And so we can get different answers. Not only fine thanks. How are you? Fine thanks. No, we can get some answers that could help us to understand the situation of the student. I'm feeling good, well, very well, bad, terrible, horrible, angry, furious, cross, absent, fine. And you can start to demonstrate that you are interested in mental situation of the student. Sorry, I don't know the time. No, it doesn't matter. The video is only 4 minutes. I have 5 minutes. Okay, only 1 minute the video, please.
Story time, Marina! Story time, Marina!
Hello everyone. Today's story is The Color Monster, a story about emotions by Anna Yates. This is the color monster. Today he woke up feeling confused, and he doesn't know why. Are you all mixed up again, color monster? Your emotions don't work well when they're all jumbled up. You should try to separate them and put each one in its own jar. If you'd like, I can help you. Let's try to assess how you feel. This is happiness. It shines yellow like the sun and twinkles like the stars.
Okay, thanks a lot. I think that you can watch the video. It is easy to find on YouTube. Finally, as a summary, I read my conclusion. Including emotional education in the English curriculum will help students to recognize and manage their emotions and take advantage of them to enhance their learning, strengthening their confidence, enthusiasm, joy, wonder, and curiosity, and appropriately manage emotions that can hinder learning, as fear, anxiety, anger, guilt, envy, or boredom. The students will be able to identify and describe the sensations in the body and the facial muscles related to specific emotions. Okay, I suggest you to watch this film, Inside Out. It's fantastic. Fantastic. The Inside Out one tries sadness, anger, disgust, fear, joy. Disgust no es disgusto, asco. We need that the students feel asco for drugs, asco for things that they are not committing for anything. Okay, and then in June, we are going to have Inside Out 2 in June. It will be wonderful to watch the video with your students, and of course, in English. In my experience, I like it to watch videos or movies with English subtitles because they are listening, watching, and reading. Inside Out works with another emotions: envious, envy, embarrassment, and anxious. Do you think that we have a sick society or no? Sick society or no? Why? Sick society. Yes. Suicide, corruption, yes. Drug consumption, consumerism. All these aspects will be better if we work emotional education with our students in class, and of course, emotional education for us as teachers, because we need it. Thank you very much.
And do we have any questions from any person in the audience? Teachers, students? I think they're all impressed and amazed after your presentation, Professor. I think they don't have any questions.
Said Maria Gracia, everything very clear? Don't understand? Or it was not interesting? Well, thank you very much.
To wrap up this morning journey, we have the last presentation, a powerful tool to rethink and re-evaluate our curriculums by Masters of Science Diana Alarcón from Luis Maria Jimenez School. Diana Alarcón, she is a graduate in foreign languages, teacher and master's degree in education and new technologies. Fulbright alumna, participant in the EFL teacher training program at the University of California at Davis in 2016, and United Nations Alliance of Civilizations alumna. Participant in the summer school program for Global Young Leaders New York in 2015. She has worked for more than 10 years in public schools and has 7 years of experience in university teaching. Professor Diana.
Okay, good morning, everybody. First of all, thank you to the Unitropico University for having this beautiful space to share all our experiences. So this is the title of my presentation, Assessment as a Powerful Tool to Rethink and Reevaluate Our Curriculums. I would like to start the presentation with this phrase. Assessment is today's means of modifying tomorrow's instruction. So I want you guys to think about assessment as a powerful communicative tool. Think about it as if we were artists. So assessment is the means of communication that our piece of art has to tell us everything. How is the process going? Are we doing a good job? Are we not doing a pretty very good job? So it gives us information. Are the strategies that we are using the correct ones? Are we achieving our objectives? They also tell us a lot of information about how our students are feeling, how our students are overcoming their opportunities, not weaknesses, opportunities of learning. So in this presentation, I want you guys to have this in mind, assessment as to be interpreted as encompassing all those activities undertaken by teachers and or by their students, which provide information to be used as feedback to modify the teaching and learning activities in which they are engaged. Also, curriculum. The curriculum is a field of inquiry and action on all that bears on schooling, including content, teaching, learning, and resources. So I want you to have an approach about curriculum, not like something specific that is there and is untouchable. We can change our curriculums. We can transform our students' experiences according as we see from assessment. So if we notice that our students are not having a good process, we need to change. We need to rethink and reevaluate our processes, and that's not bad. That's something pretty good. So I'm here to tell you, well, to share with you a little bit about the experience that we have had in the Luis Maria Jimenez School about evaluation, about assessment. So a little bit of our context. This is a school located in a rural area of Aguasur Casanare. Most of our students live in farms, I would say very far away. For me, 2 hours to get to the school is a far way to get to school, a long way. So we also have students who do not have internet connection at home, so they do not have a lot of tools for practicing on their own the English. Normally we have small classrooms because we are in a rural areas. However, this year we have a lot of students. We have courses from 19 students to 44 students in one classroom because I don't know what happened there. But we have in 6th and 7th grade most of students. It appears that our school is calling the attention for some reason. So I want to share the institutional mission and vision. I once heard and listened to a teacher telling me, okay, that your mission is the mission of all the high schools, right? So yes, our mission is that all our students can get to the university. Yeah, that's the highest mission of a high school, right? So we are very, very interested in that in our school, and we take it very seriously. All the activities that we do in our schools have as a goal to go there. So I want to share with you these are the scores that we get in English in our schools. As you can see, we were increasing the scores, but we have 2020 that that was the pandemic, so it's like normal. It happened in almost all the schools in Colombia, and then we had 2021. 2021 for us as English teachers in this school was very controversial. We started to see that our students, even from the highest levels, like I would say 11th grade, didn't even know the personal pronouns. Like you would say, how come? How come that this could happen? We have taken our students from preschool to high school, and they don't even know the pronouns. So that was very strange, and we started to see, okay, what's happening? And it made us think about if the 11th graders are in this level, how are those from 6th or 7th grade? So we decided to have our students taken a test. It was a standardized test. We had well, this test could evaluate until B1, but we were like giving them parts apart, like first for basic, then advanced, and so on. So what happened was that our students got so low scores that we had to make a subdivision and we had to separate, like from level 1, there were students who were in a high level of level 1, but there were also a lot of students who had very, very low level. So we divided the level 1 into 3 subgroups in order to see what was happening and in order to make decisions. Okay, so next. So with that information, 242 students were located in level 1 basic. Only 22 students were in intermediate, and level 1 advanced were just 15 students. With that, that information, we have level 1 basic, 85% of our students, from 6th grade to 11th grade. That was very surprising and a little bit hard for us, because that's our reality. That was what we had. Now what? Now what? We started to think a lot. Here is my partner in that adventure, Maribel, and she knows that we were thinking like that. How come? How can we do? What can we do to make this better? Because it's a lot. So we started to think about curriculum. 4 aspects about curriculum. With the results from the test, we told the principal of our school, okay, this happens in English, we need your cooperation, we need your support if we want to get better. So he was okay, what do you need? So we started with class time. We needed more time for the classes. Change the content, teaching methodology, and evaluation. Those were the aspects in curriculum that we have into account to change. So let's start with class time. In short, we got 1 hour raise for each part of the school, like primary school. Now we have 2 hours. From 6th to 9th grade, we have 4 hours. And from 10th to 11th grade, we increased to 5 hours. About content, we decided that we wanted to have some materials that would help us to diversify our classrooms, to teach not only English, but to teach culture, to be able to open the doors, to open the windows, or to open the eyes of our students to the world. So we decided to have these books from National Geographic, and they also have a teacher's tool. So we have for high school, and this is for primary school. So now all the schools from preschool to 11th grade, we have books for teaching. That's it. Okay, now let's think about teaching methodology. So the methodology had to change. But what could we do with the students in one group, with the students that spoke English, with the students who didn't even know the pronouns? So this is what we thought. First question, how come that the 11th graders don't even remember the personal pronouns in English? How come? So how we got to this? So I was thinking, okay, reflecting on how my classes went. I explain a topic, we do some activities, and we ask the students, do you have any question? And they answer, no. Do you understand something? Did you understand? And the students say, yes. Yes. So you happily continue with the class, no problem. And year after year, and we didn't notice that there were a lot of students on the corner who didn't learn in all those years because they were just silent. Those are the students who never participate. And those are the students who have never had the chance to prove if they really can't or can't learn because they were just lazy, we could say, maybe because the class were not motivated enough, who knows. But we found that most of our children were like that. So we decided, well, the other two questions, could you go back please? What can we do to help students to start learning and really studying? How can students be assessed with the same tests if they don't have the same English performance? So sometimes we explain a topic, let's say simple present, and we do a lot of activities, and at the end we have them to take a test, but there were some who never did something for real. They are not going to pass the test, they are going to fail, of course. So we thought about multi-level classrooms, and this is a sentence that caught my attention because it's what happens in our classrooms now. It doesn't matter what others are doing, it matters what you are doing. So what happens is that now we have in the classroom those students like in different groups. So we have the students with a very, very low level, we have students with an intermediate level, and we have autonomous learners. These students are students who almost never require help from me or for the English teachers because they already know what to do in the classes, what to learn, and they know how to learn by themselves. In the intermediate level, we have students who need a little bit of help, but they already know what to learn, and they just ask me something when they need. And I dedicate most of my classes to those students who really need attention. And they are not forced to learn a lot, they are just, okay, do what you have to do, and try. So the outcome is very different to what we had. So why multi-level classrooms? The students are able to learn at their own pace. The students learn to work well in a group. Students become independent learners. The students develop strong relationships with their peers. The students become partners in learning. In a multi-level classroom, teachers begin where students are, not the front of a curriculum guide. Multi-level classrooms allow for continuous progress. All learners can be challenged. In a multi-level environment, students with a higher level do not need to spend time on concepts and skills they have already mastered. There are some students in the higher levels who say, teacher, I already know this, and you can assess me if you want, but I would like to be reading this book in English. May I? Of course. Yes, it's open. It's open for them. I don't worry about them because they already have a pretty good level. So we decided, well, for one side we had multi-level classrooms, but by the other side we have INFES training for 11th graders especially. So as you know, in Colombia we have this Saber 11 test, and that's how they evaluate it. So it's like telling you that you tomorrow are going to present the TOEFL or the IELTS with no preparation. How would it be? Here, like, terrible, a disaster. So why to expose our students to a test, because the INFES test has them presenting, it's not easy, but it's not that easy, but it's not that difficult either, right? But with no preparation, with the time, with the clock running, it's very, very stressful and very difficult for students. So what we do is that we prepare our students for taking the test. So, okay, after each mock test that they take, we do have the feedback, and we, from that part, from the scores, we need to always do feedback, to tell them what's right, what's wrong, how to improve, give them tips and everything they need to take the test again, and so on. Okay? So the results. This is a report from the ICFES. And here in the first graphic, we have our school. Down there we have A-, A1, A2, B1, and B+. And over there, the first one is our school, the second one is Colombia, and the third one is Casanare. You can notice the results and you can compare. I cannot say that it's totally our results, like, oh yeah, we did it. It's a lot of work, yes? And somehow they are able to do it. Well, it's not, well, you can see. So this is, again, this is our school. These are urban schools, then rural schools, and then private schools. Yeah? So if we compare, even con private schools, if we compare, we have 0 students in A- compared to private schools that they have, I cannot see the number. No. Can you see it? 51%, I think. Then we have in A1, 16% of our students, and private schools we have 20%, 37% A2 in our school, and private schools 16%. We have 42% of students in B1, and we have 19% of private schools, of students in private schools. So that's it. Now I have also some outcomes from multi-level classrooms. So this is what I have found in my classroom, what happens. So autonomous work and self-regulation has improved, especially among students with higher English level. There was a raise in the awareness of the students' learning process. As they have to decide sometimes what to learn, they are more aware of what they are doing. Motivation and peer work among students with a low performance in English. Encouragement and support among peers is becoming more and more common in our classrooms. The students with low performance demonstrated that they don't want to leave any classmate behind. So what happens is that as they are in groups, as they are advancing, the groups are changing. And when they start to see just a few students in the low level, they are like, okay, I need help, or they offer to help them, or they ask for help, and that's something very good. The students who are tested more frequently showed a significant advantage from the others. This kind of classroom helps the so-called low attainers from the rest, and so reduces the spread of attainment while also raising it overall. Teacher and low achieving students' interaction is higher, and it's focused on improving the students' performance. And when assessing a unit, and this is something that I really like, when assessing a unit for the second or third time, students start noticing their own weaknesses and strengths and start working on them. So I know could sound a little like, okay, so they go over the same unit once and twice and 3 times and so on? Yes. Why? Because what happened to us in that 11th grade in 2021 was that we were passing the students by year, not by English level. Yeah? So with this, we are sure that if they pass the level, it's because they do know, not because they pass the grade. Okay, so from the second or third time, if it's needed, when they see the same unit, they realize what are the mistakes that they are having, and they start working on them to improve. Okay, conclusions. I'm just going to give two conclusions. One, that is that assessment is not a monster. Assessment is a very powerful tool that gives us a lot of information that is our friend. And it helps us to be more aware of our process. And the other one is that multi-level classroom give us the chance of discovering what there is in our students' mind, why they are not learning. How can we help them to learn better? So I think that's it. Thank you so much.
From the audience, over there.
Hello. Well, thank you for your presentation. I think all of us as teachers, we are aware of the results from Maria Jimenez. We have heard about the good results, of course. I was wondering about the matching in between the results with the students' proficiency. You were talking about the exam, how you train them to succeed on the exam. But I was wondering if the 40% of the students that have B1 really show that in the proficiency level in terms of, for example, speaking, reading, listening, or the strategies you were emphasizing on were more the presentation of the exam. So the first question. And the second question, you were showing some pictures about the National Geographic platform. I was wondering if it is paid or it is a free resource that we can all have access to. So that's it, basically those two questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Well, as you know, the ICFES test only evaluates, well, not only because it's a lot, it evaluates reading comprehension, grammar, maybe using English in a context, yeah, but it doesn't evaluate speaking or listening. However, I wouldn't say like the 42% would represent that level if they take a TOEFL test. Yeah, of course not, because they are not in the level. However, they are able to have a conversation. They are able to maybe read a text and talk about it. Yeah, pretty much. But there are others who they are just good readers and they can have a good vocabulary. So yeah, so that's it. And about the second question, this is paid, but what we did is the National Geographic give the, well, we bought just, I'm going to tell you the truth. We don't, the students in our schools, they don't have the book, because we bought only 5 samples of each level, yeah? But they give us the teacher's tool. So that's what we use to teach. And it's for, like, with 5 books, they gave us the tool. Even with 1 book, yeah? So that's it. Yeah, it's not so expensive that, like, the schools couldn't make the effort. No, it's not, okay?
Thank you for your answers.
You're welcome.
Here.
Hi. Sí. Okay. Hello.
Okay. Hi, Jan.
Hi.
Okay, congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Very good job. Okay, I have actually two questions. Did you make new groups? Or the different groups, the 11th, 7th, or 9th grades are the same groups, or you made the different groups by levels? It's the first question.
Okay.
The second, okay, maybe how did you deal with lazy boys, lazy students, and those ones who don't want to learn, to maybe motivation are not in them. So it's very, it's very interesting the way or the strategy you use to motivate them, okay? Especially in high schools.
Okay, in my case, I teach, what was the first question?
What?
The first question. That would be a great change if we could do that, but we can't. So we have the levels in the same, like for example, 10th graders, they are in the classroom, but within this classroom there are different levels. Yes, so it's not like we have all mixed up from different grades. That would be great, but we can't. So in the courses we have in the classroom, we have from the same course, different levels. And the second question, it's different when you have the different groups and when you know what students have which level. And so I don't have to worry about the ones with higher level, but with those with low level. So what we do is that I go with them. I don't know why they don't like me that's the reality. I don't know why they don't like me to be close to them all the time. So every time I go, okay, it's not working, okay, I go there, they start working. Because they don't want like the mom every time going there, okay, what are you doing? But yes, so they start working. I don't know, it's magic. But it happens like that. So as I'm not worried about all the classroom, but only them, so it's easy for me. However, I know that maybe from the teacher that teaches on 6th, 7th, and 8th grade is much difficult because the level is lower. It means that she has more students in low level, so much more students to pay attention to.
Okay, sure. Maybe you talk that maybe some groups are in different levels in the same group.
Yes.
Okay, this is a kind of activity of differentiation strategies. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, I'm very impressed with your work because usually we have presentations about theories and ideas, but this is something that actually works. You presented the results and it works. It is just wonderful.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's not easy. Well, I think all the morning agenda was already wrapped up. See you for the presentations in the afternoon at 2 p.m. right here in the same place. Nos vemos 2 de la tarde para las ponencias que hacen falta. Gracias por venir. A los espectadores de Facebook Live también gracias.
Facebook Live.
Yo,
sí, más las dos que eran para serían dos.